Do It's time for the Saturday viewer tournaments. Well, not really. In half an hour. Magnus Carlsen explains chess to Joe Rogan. Nice. So I'm just trying to find the YouTube video so that I can answer any questions over there. All right. Test, test, test. Hopefully the audio's okay. Let's go over here. Chess Dojo. 3 Saturday Rapid Arenas, 13 to 1700, 1700 plus, under 1300. Perfection. Let's click one of them just for argument's sake, see what we get. A couple people already popped in. Good, that one's working. 13 to 1700, working. Under 1300. Nobody's in it just yet, but hopefully it's working. Alrighty. I haven't gotten to play chess myself in a week, so let's play a silly blitz game while waiting for our tournament. Morning going well. Is it worth memorizing chess games? Sure. Could be. It's a rather small part of our training program. We have people memorize one game. See, something where the queen hits this thing. We have people memorize one single game per 100 points. So it's not a super significant part of the training program. I'll put it here. Compared to g3, bishop g2, it lets me castle and get my rooks out just a little bit faster, because I can play bishop f3 later. I saved that one tempo on g3 for now. I don't think this should be black's best option. Because it creates an actual weakness for me to get excited about. They could just step back, and what do I achieve? Okay, I got it. Knight here. And then against like rook c8 or queen c7, queen a4 is correct. Hey, Thurston. The third group is under 1300 right now. Okay. So I could take, and that's not much. That was a good defensive choice by the adversary. I may have to step away from it, like so. It's not ideal. I need to keep my bishop's influence and the possibility of e4, so I went here instead of knight e4. I've used too much time, I guess, by blitz standards trying to play sort of good moves. Now there's b5, huh? No, there's not. It's fine. So I threaten bishop takes d5, queen takes a7, and knight c6 all at once. Yeah. And now I'll have to switch to playing blitz. Did that move defend everything? It better not have. It almost did. It defended a lot of things. Oh, God. Oh, God. I forgot that move completely. Shoot. It did defend everything. All that thought just to play a bad game and blunder the knight away. A knight against a bishop pair. Well, we'll just try to win back one pawn at a time, huh? All right. Perfectly played by my opponent there. That was very nice defense. I thought I was so clever here, but this move's just a blunder, so I don't know what I should have done at this point. Let me just see what it says. Yeah, up to here I have a pretty good position, but there's nothing really clear, huh? Man. Okay. All right, folks, I remind you that you might want to join the tournament, perhaps. It'll be fun. Rapid Arenas. I'm just sending out a tweet because I see not many people in the under 1300 arena, so I'm going to hope to drum up some opponents for you all. We'll go there. We'll go to the Chess Dojo server as well. We got the links here. Sorry, folks, just trying to find opponents for the folks in the under 1300 tournament right now. So I'm sending out an alert on Discord as well. Okay. Now I've sort of done what we can, and we can just hope that those who want to will get the message in time. When you play aggressively in opening or middle game, I'm going to need more context for that question, Ash. One can play aggressively in any phase of the game. Foulgry. Trouble sleeping? Okay. Let's go for this. I expected my opponent to castle and allow b5 and then play e5 in response because the queen and king are on the e file. But they got too scared about b5. When do you prefer to attack your opponent? I wait for my opponent to make mistakes till I don't take risks. I mean, I also think it makes sense to attack your opponent after they've made a mistake, for sure. But sometimes there are positions where you can make threats, that make the game harder for your opponent. So you can play sort of aggressive moves that aren't necessarily unsound attacks, but that are just moves that make things hard for your opponent before they've made a mistake, and it's a way to induce a mistake, like you put some pressure on them. So I think here my priority is to play knight c5 next. The point of this move is not to win a pawn. It's just a tempo on this bishop to reduce some of the pressure here. And then I want to keep developing. Like so. And here if I get the chance. Should calculate bishop h6 a little bit. Okay, they do something else. So it's no big deal. Okay, they want to do it next, but not allow queen c3. It's fine. Samarth, you just have to wait for more people to join that category, I guess. Ah! Samarth, why didn't you warn me about this? I just hung my queen. Samarth. Okay, what's the choice? There's another 10 minutes for people to join, so you don't need to give up yet. You've seen the evidence, Falgry. You've seen the evidence. Hung my queen just like anybody else. Ah, good move by the enemy. Shoot. Brutal. That was really too bad. Bishop g5. What was I supposed to do, though? I thought my position was going really well. I don't drink coffee, Ash. I kind of wanted to go to f6, but then there was this tempo with knight e4. Maybe h6 before knight b4. I'm trying to play faster than I normally do as well. Tournaments start in 5 or 6 minutes, friends. So be sure to join up if you want to play today. 15 minutes with a 5-second increment. Yeah, I should very much have played h6 last move. It was like completely winning. You imagine if I played h6 first and the knight were on f3, I could go queen e4 check and just chase the opponent around. What are they doing now? They're refusing to accept reality, I guess. The knight's almost trapped. I'm going to go for a checkmating attack on this king. So I'll go put my king in the riskier position here of my options. Trying to land some kind of a tactic on this king. Come on, D-Pawn. Come on, D-Pawn. Tournaments are starting, friends. The tournaments are starting in 14 seconds. Under 1300 arena. Looks good. 6 players. Let us see about the other arenas. 1700 plus section for Samarth. 5 players, so that'll kick off as well. In fact, the games have kicked off. For some reason, Samarth is the only person who didn't get paired. Must have somehow, Chess.com must have thought that you were idle. Well, and it's a good thing you did, Merles, because I think Samarth had joined so long ago that Chess.com somehow thought that they were idle and not actually playing or something. All right. Arena has started, Dr. P-Foul. That's correct. After C3 instead of knight C6, there was also HG, which was also slightly promising, Foos, but I think less promising. Slightly. Okay, we've got a closed Sicilian here, and black making the effort to break in the center immediately. And white looks to get slightly ahead in development since black's made this effort to open the game. White's going to look to try and get a small development lead going here. See ya, P-Foul. Have a great tournament. Have fun games. All right, so now it's all current events. All 3 rapids held. Excellent. Let's for once remember to edit this and take off the time it starts. All right. And let's get back into our games. So bishop b5, knight f6. White chooses to trade off on c6, sort of positionally aggressive. Somebody was asking me earlier, Ash, about aggression, I think. So bishop takes c6 is strategically aggressive because it's creating this imbalance when white didn't need to do it, right? Hey, Death by Lactose, how you doing? Welcome into the tournaments. Death by Lactose played in Friday Night Fights last night as well, like Falgrim. All right, so very important question is how good will this bishop be that doesn't have a bishop on it to oppose any light square diagonals that open up? And how much of a problem will these doubled pawns be? Kind of big questions here. White might want to sink the knight into e5 immediately, getting out of the way of bishop g4, starting to look at that pawn. But white also wants to develop these pieces here, and this bishop doesn't have a great square right now. So white's a little bit lacking space in the center, and this bishop is suffering a small amount from it. Right? If it goes to e3, there's d4. Not to mention, rook e8, etc. is just not the best square. And on d2, it does nothing. Simply speaking, right? So we could play with our pretty pieces, like I said, knight e5. But what are we planning to do with these? We'll have to do something. Honestly, I think the bishop's just going to have to end up on d2 because b3 is pretty time intensive. This is a very good position for 10,000 checks to be stopping and coming up with the next phase of the development scheme, right? Which is, where is this going? Do we or don't we want to throw in this knight e5 move? Because you may or may not be able to support it. Like, let's say black defends the c6 pawn and threatens your knight. Well, now a move like bishop d2, you're sacking pawns, right? So what are we planning to do right there as white once we go into a strong point, but then we don't have the full development, Okay. So, what did white come up with? Queen e1. Interesting. So that's going to get hit on the file. She must think she's got a great future over here, huh? Because certainly black wanted to play rook e8. Do I see engine moves while commenting? Occasionally, Ash. Sometimes I find an engine move. But in general, no. There was another question from you earlier. Do I play gambits in openings in serious games? Yes, I do. Less so now. More when I was younger and more aggressive. But I've played dozens and dozens of King's Gambits against opponents of any level up through Grandmaster. I've played it at the U.S. Championships and so forth. So, yeah, I played a lot of not necessarily the best openings up to, the level I got to. And I think that they actually hampered me a little bit, Queen h4, that's where we expected it to go. Bishop f5. I think it hampered me a little bit, kept me from getting better than... Maybe held me back from getting a little bit better. But I played King's Gambit. I played Benko Gambit for a while. But normally, as you were saying, normally you have to wait a little bit longer in the game before you can sacrifice pawns in it for it to be good, in the first couple moves. The gambits that have names to them, that are sort of opening variations, are normally not that good. But if you play good, solid moves, then a few moves down the road, there are lots of different positions in which you can sack pawns, and it could be interesting. Not necessarily good or bad. So bishop f5. Reasonable square for the piece, making room for these pieces to come next. What's the queen on h4 doing? Maybe applying a little pressure to this knight or this pawn. Still a long way from seeing a real plan for white. So they've played bishop d2, which had to happen at some point. Queen b6. Threatening this, and maybe with the idea of playing c4 check. Depending on how white defends the pawn. c4 check potentially could allow you to trade some pawns and make this bishop on f5 really good. But at the moment, let's say I play b3, c4 check. White does have d4. Bishop c2. More or less super, super crushingly good for black. Yeah, that's pretty much killing. It may not seem like a big deal because, white takes here. Black has an extra doubled pawn. Why is it killing? But this bishop just becomes too good. Positionally speaking, at the level of these players, it's already a big deal for black to just get control of the light squares like this. So let's see. Oinus is saying maybe white can play knight a4 here, and that is what white does. Knight a4, normally a bad square on the rim, where the knight is slim, as I recently learned. But here, very, very logical, because you avoid that c4 check move, and b3 is very much part of our plan. And the knight is attacking the c5 pawn. But Apache Sun knows exactly what they want to do, and immediately, not immediately on time, they spent 20 seconds thinking, but immediately in terms of tempo, they play c4 themselves here right away, trying to break open this light squared bishop. And knight d4, bishop c5 is what they had to calculate. 20 seconds is pretty fast to play this move. That's pretty darn fast to play this move. I don't know if they really deeply looked into knight d4. Bishop c5 is the only move here, because if you move your queen somewhere, knight takes bishop wins a piece. So bishop c5 is the only move, and now white probably trades that piece, and black no longer has the bishop pair, right? So instead, we switch to an opposite colored bishop game at this point, and it's pretty funky here. Knight c5, queen c5. If you go queen f2, there's knight g4. You know, like here. b4, important detail still. This could still win for white, because look, knight f2, pawn takes, and the knight and bishop are both hanging. Black's going to lose a piece. But queen b6. And if the white queen moves, queen d4. So black just barely wins in that variation. Very important. So no queen f2. Bishop c3, there's pawn takes, attacking the bishop. That's not ideal either. So white needs quite a move here. You learn knight on the rim is sure to get a trim? Oh, what? And then the Humpty Dumpty version, knight on the wall is sure to fall? Man, I thought everybody in the US learned knight on the rim is dim. I thought that was what everybody had learned. And now I'm learning that there's like a million different weird things that people say in different, I don't know, states or towns or whatever. Ash, you ruined your early progress with Gambits, and then you read 60 memorable games by Bobby Fischer, and you started watching live tournament games of Strong Masters, and you turned things around. Nice. Makes sense. White's in quite a quandary. It seems like any move that supports the knight is going to fall into pawn takes pawn, breaking up the light squares. You see, the critical thing white wants here is they want this tempo on the bishop. You know, they want to play a move like queen f2 that defends the knight and opens this threat so black doesn't have time to take on d3. But it seems there's no such move because of queen f2, knight g4, and bishop c3, cd3 hitting the bishop. So it looks like Apache Sun got this whole sequence correct from black's perspective. But man, it was hard to see this coming in advance like that. Perhaps the best thing that can be done is support the knight really solidly with pawn c3. And, then black plays with the bishop, not the pawn. That's the problem. Hey, there's the rub. For in that bishop d3, what chances lie are but a slim, slim, slim dream for white. So Apache Sun pretty much busted anything white could do, I think. Bishop c3 played after 3 minutes of regret from white. And black has, pretty simple c takes d3, and they are in the driver's seat of this game, breaking up white's pawn structure, which was intended, folks, this pawn structure was intended to limit that bishop, right? And now that bishop is loose, like a long-legged goose. All right, king h1 played, dropping the bishop on c3, just under the pressure of black's excellent moves. White misses a detail. Oh no, they have a plan. Queen c3, knight f5. They didn't miss it at all. Okay, sorry. I apologize instantaneously here. The point of king h1 was, of course, if this to come here looking for some counter chances, because things are going badly and we're losing 1 to 2 pawns no matter what, right? Like bishop b2, pawn takes, king h1, bishop d3 or bishop e4, whatever. White's down 2 pawns and not feeling very good, like very slim chances. So king h1 is played to get this tempo move sooner onto black. Makes sense. And now black has to choose between queen c3 and bishop e4 and maybe some other fancier move. Queen c3 comes in, the simpler of the moves. I think that's what I was leaning toward. From here, the queen will sort of help stop some of these threats. So black might take the time to take here. I think they will. I think black's going to take here. Anyway, you could also play d2, playing for rook e1 at some point. And when white goes queen g5, black's going to play g6, and there will be some weaknesses and there is some fight. So this was actually very good, very resilient of 10,000 checks to go for this funky king h1 move with the bishop hanging on c3. They're not going down without some fighting. Yes, sir. Water. All right, so from Black's perspective, what can we do here? I don't feel like a move like h6 helps. I don't feel like g6 helps much. So to me, it's really between takes and pushes. And look at that move from Apache Sun. Wow. That's like definitely the classier move. You know, the blitz move is to take your opponent's pawn. Okay. Well, White's got a very short period of time to land something on Black before Black doubles rooks and ends up with a rook on e1. And it all falls apart. So, natural would be queen g5, g6, knight h6 check, and then f5, trying to open up the rook, looking for some kind of tactic on f6 or f7 before it's all over. Queen g3 is played, going for the endgame. Wow. Remarkable patience and resilience from White. So Black's going to have to take. White's going to take here, keeping the rook out of e2. And hoping to go after this pawn. Black can play knight e4 to support it. Oh, and if we ever trade, then pawn takes and e3 is the end of the world. So we can't take. But what we can do is go here. Then Black has to trade themselves, let's say, and go here. I have to go here first. If I go rook f3, headed this way, there's rook e1 check. I have to go king h2. Black maybe... Actually, if White's plan is rook f3, d3, bringing the rook to the file might not really do anything about that. Well, okay, there is an idea that you would go like here, here, here. And now White can't play rook d3 because of check. But it feels a little artificial. g4 here and here looks okay for White. The idea is you can eventually bring your king over and chase the rook out of defending this pawn. So I'm thinking maybe c5, rook f3, c4, preventing the rook d3 plan. And then we get something like this. Even the tactical part of this doesn't work for Black. Not to mention that White could... Black's not really threatening anything from here, so White could wait somehow. Huh. A pretty resilient move. Okay, let's see. Black has traded queens, played knight e4. We're into this position here. I suppose against rook d1, another move for Black is rook d8 instead of taking on g3 yourself. Because now if White ever takes, the rook is here, and you get time to play e3. Yeah, so rook d1, rook d8 is another option for Black. And then White's still a little bit frozen. And the question is, does rook f3 lose to knight c3 or not? Not. So rook f3 could still be playable here. You don't threaten rook d3 because of knight f2, but the plan is to now bring the king over towards f1. Yeah, hard to see if Black can convert this pawn or lose it. Wow. What steadiness by White. to suffer instead of going for, wild tactical moves. This is what I assumed like anybody would be going for. Something like this. Rook E1. I guess it looks pretty desperate, doesn't it? And white just loses in 2 moves. Maybe 10,000 checks looked into this a little bit and just said, yeah, it's just completely over. And maybe that caused them to look for queen g3, but what a steady defensive move. All right, we get into this rook ending. Predicted. Okay, so I haven't yet seen a way for black to really hold this advantage after king h2, rook f3, rook d3. You can find all our suggestions, Ash, on the website. Chess Dojo. I think it's under material, maybe books. And you can see, you can only see one column of them, but there's 2 columns. There's 0 to 300, 300, 400, 400, 500, 500, 600. You can see all the book recommendations for any rating level. So these are based on like OTB ratings. So if you're looking at a chess.com rating, you'll want to subtract like 150 points maybe. If you're looking at a Lichess rating, you might have to subtract like 500 points or so. But here's like a great recommendation for a 1200 level player. Modern Ideas in Chess. This one's good too. Yasser Seirawan, Winning Chess Strategies. Or if your rating is like an online rating, maybe Irving Chernev, Most Instructive Games could still be good for you. Oh, you can't see that column, the 1100 to 1200 suggestion. Anyway, it's there. I guess I'll give you a direct link to it. And go back to our game. Okay, rook e2. King h2, perfect. Rook to the open file. And now rook f3, rook d3. And the pawn falls. Wow. Bit of a surprise for the incredibly powerful Apache Sun that 10,000 checks is hanging with it this game and actually putting up a kicking, screaming, successful dour defense. Oh, man. This is the kind of draw you can be super proud about for white. If they get it. My point is just, sometimes you can be proud of a game you don't win, right? Like if you defend super well from a bad position, have a bunch of really cool ideas, calculate stuff, play precisely, king h2, then rook f3. You can be proud of a game even if you don't win it. And that's not to say that, neither player could still win this game. It's an equal rook and pawn ending, it looks like to me, which means still, very possible for either side to outplay the opponent if they're particularly good at rook endgames, or if the opponent just happens to make one slip, loses their focus or attention for a moment. see white with only 3 minutes to play this endgame, but they needed that time. They needed to navigate this, and once they collect the pawn on d2, it'll be a bit of a sigh of relief. We'll see if either player loses focus. Rook e6. Yeah, trickiest move, threatening rook h6 check. No! White plays rook d3, one move too soon. And black gets the win with the tactical trickery. Ay, ay, ay. Remember, folks, this rook h6, rook e1 trick, you have to play g4 as white. Then against rook h6, both rook h3 and king g3 are fine, actually. Both are fine. One last trick, and white played this move in 3 seconds because they were getting low on time. Just ran out of resources. And that's the game. Woo! All it takes, you see, is losing your focus for 1 instant, right? You can play 30 great moves in a row. You lose your focus for 1 instant, and the game is gone. Yeah. Okay, let's go to our under 1300 group and watch a game from that section. So here we've got Lazy Man versus Entire Pigeon. Might be nice if we could see their whole names, no? What would it take to see their names? Chess.com, no? Impossible? Sorry, folks. I was just trying to see if I could adjust it so that the interface would show the names of the players, and I could not find any. Any resolution at which it would be showed. Okay, well, let's get into analyzing it anyway. So, queen here. Black has an extra knight at the moment, right? Once they extricate the queen? Yeah. All right, so we got to choose how to save the queen. Here's one way that doesn't work. Very important to notice for black. Because they might want to trade queens since they're up a knight. They avoid the trap. Very good. Queen g6. She runs away. That was the only other square, huh? There was like this square, and queen a4 would have been okay too, I guess. Queen a4 would have been fine. All right, and now we have to worry about queen b6. That would be the sneaky move for white. Oh, man. Lazy Man, that looks like the right move. Let's see if you can find it. Queen b6. Attacking the rook and the knight. I guess rook e7 would be okay for black. So it's not that big a deal, but it's could be hard to find. Could be a little shocking. I noticed that black has this back rank mate, right? That's part of why queen b3 wasn't good. So white could try and do something with that. Black's got 2 minutes left. White's just under 4. Looking for a way to put some pressure on black. The knight doesn't really have anywhere to go. So that is definitely a reasonable piece to try to attack. I suppose he could kind of escape through f5 in some cases right now. Right? Because of the king, the pawn can't take. Okay, we got to move from white, queen b5. Not sure what the main plan is there. Black gets rid of their back rank mate, which is pretty good. I would have done it with the move h5, just to start attacking white's king at the same time. You know, it makes use of these knights. They're both focused on this pawn, which is defended h5. would be a heck of a move for black if they ever get the chance to do it. Bishop takes c4, fancy move from white. Black without the back rank should be able to win that piece here. They take with the d-pawn and white gets their point. Rook takes e3. But presumably, knight takes c4 would have saved the knight while capturing the bishop. And that was kind of a big part of white's problem, is this knight is sort of attacked by the rook but blocked by the bishop. It has seemingly nowhere to go. But your bishop can't move to open up the attack. All the bishop's moves are squares where the knight can take it, right? Including this one. Okay, but luckily for white, black takes here. Then goes for a queen trade. White gets the pass pawns going on this side when black can't take because of rook takes c8. Clever. Clever move. Black brings the knight to a better square. I approve heartily. 1.5 minutes left to try and convert this endgame. It won't be easy. It's all about this c-pawn at the moment. That is black's powerful piece. White could go e5 and win back a pawn here, but the rook kind of abandons the defense. But at least you get a tempo by attacking the knight. Oh, we've got a move from white. Let's see what it was. It was rook e5. So now the knight probably wants to move. You can also play rook d7. But against rook d7, you encourage these pawns to keep moving. I think knight f4 with some forks available. Like rook takes g5, walks into knight e2 check, and leaving the rook on e5 walks into knight d3, you know, king f1. So white needs to move this rook, say to c2. But it's not obvious. Or maybe c3. If you trust your buddy on e5 not to let you down, you could go here and try and defend your pawns and blockade this one. But you really have to trust that if your opponent attacks this rook, it's going to stay on the e-file. Because if it wanders off somewhere, then it's curtains. Knight f4 played. White thinking. 1 minute left for black, 2 minutes for white. Makes a real scramble of this endgame here. They've got a 5-second increment, so if they've got experience playing online, they should be able to get in their moves and not flag. But one can certainly find games where people panic once they get down to low amounts of time. Now, of course, you also have the players in the under 1300 section sometimes who spend only a couple seconds and have 15 minutes left at the end of the game. Those players would have no trouble bashing out their remaining moves. But these are two players who've spent all their time reflecting on their moves, so they're players who probably want more time to think, and they may not be, you know, bullet fiends who can blitz out the last moves calmly and confidently. Here as white, I would play something like king f1 or king f2 to get out of the range of knight e2, and king f2 would be the worst choice because of knight d3. So I should go to f1. But white went to f2 as well, and black didn't find knight d3. Whew! Huge sigh of relief for white. And now there's the option to trade one rook and clean up that c-pawn. That's going to make winning the game much harder for black. I see that black has suddenly sped up. The last couple moves have been played, you know, in kind of seconds. But it's not so easy to play at the same level once we play that fast. And by the way, anybody joining us right now in the crowd, you may or may not know this, but late joining is always possible. That's why I've been running these tournaments as arenas instead of Swisses lately. There goes the c-pawn. So you're welcome to join. Anybody who wants to as you come in, you are welcome. Okay, black gets rid of the a-pawn. That's very good. And has caught up on the clock. Now 1 minute against 1 minute. There goes white's counterplay. That b-pawn comes forward. Black has to combine playing quickly and playing well. What a difficult task. Oh, the king slips into the mate box. Black doesn't find it. Checks the king over here. That's just a pattern, right? A funky pattern of knight and rook for checkmate. Very good to know. King drops back. I mean, I would have gone to h3 even though it allows checkmate. Because at this point, my opponent didn't find the checkmate once, and this move allows knight d4, knight b5, cleaning up my pawn. Actually, maybe it's okay to do that. Maybe this is actually quite okay. Because after knight b5, you can play rook c5 and trade one more pawn off the board and get rid of the mating net around the king. No, this was a great decision by white, actually, if they can find this idea of coming to the 5th rank and getting rid of that g-pawn. You got to get rid of the g-pawn. Yes! They find it! Oh, it's going to be a tough endgame to convert. Who knows? Oh, there goes the knight! And white is going to equalize the game with 50 seconds each on the board. And we can see that black did manage to go into a faster mode. But going faster meant, you know, playing less well. Which is typical for basically all of us, right? Okay, black finds the way to defend their pawn structure here, which is good. White should either play h4 to trade that slightly bad pawn or rook e8 to cut this king off. h4 played. TJ, your game was disappointing, very messy. Sorry to hear that. You can play several games in these arenas for sure, if you'd like to. These arenas are set up, of course, for people to do whatever they want, but, you know, very, very easy to play 4 to 5 games in one of these arenas. White brings the rook around to a slightly odd square, but nothing truly wrong with it. Black plays f5 and white trades, and if black takes, then this pawn might drop. They do, and clean up the last pawn. We've got king and rook against king and rook. Bravo. Yeah. Contemplating your previous game? Surely. Makes sense. This one should be a draw, right? But they haven't agreed to a draw yet. There we go. Pieces come off the board. Well-deserved draw by both players. Strong fight. Let us check the 13 to 1700, the middle section. Like a crowd packed to the front without the midsection. That's not what we're looking for, right? So, let's make sure that we've got a midsection. Oh, Fougry's up in the 13 to 1700 section. So is Geek Guam. There are a bunch of, and G Christensen, there's a bunch of lower rated players who just put themselves up in this section here. Wow. But, okay, we came to watch a true 13 to 1700 game. So let's see how they handle this rook endgame. The material is equal. Black's got a strong pass pawn on f3, but not a great king at the moment. Rook's pretty decent. White's rook is strong. Ooh, black threatens. That's going to force this king somewhat more passive before deciding whether or not to defend this pawn. White plays a really ill-advised check, improving the position of black's king, and brings the rook around to be passive instead of the king. No! Oh, no. Oh, no. That was wrong, Alexei. So, fine is just to bring the king back here. And, maybe this was your worry, huh? Maybe that was your worry. Then here... Actually, wait. Against this, you could take the pawn, right? And then they check, and you just come here. Everything's fine. Black can get a draw. fine. That's reasonable. But the game goes on. Black could also go rook e2 or rook g2, go after one of these pawns, sack this pawn again, with a complicated situation. But this is the right way to play for sure, versus this check improving Black's king and bringing the rook around passively. Now the king comes to the defense. Okay, good. Black's maybe looking at b5. Find more room for the rook and let the king come here and defend this pawn. And white reactivates the rook, and from what we've seen up to now, I would expect b5 from Black, which opens up the c2 square. King f7, trying to keep the rook from checking him. Sure. I guess it's fine. I guess my general feeling is that Black's a little bit better in this endgame because of the strength of the f-pawn. It's not only a protected pass pawn, it's also very close to queening. So if you ever mess something up or get into a race of some kind, it's going to be really unforgiving for white, right? In that you might, one mistake could lead to an instant forced win of the pawn queening. So once we figure out that Black's better, it lets us know as white, okay, well, if we see, something equalish, we should accept it. White goes back and forth, and this continues to allow Black this b5 idea, which is dangerous looking from White's perspective. So if I were White, I would consider a4, stopping b5. And I would also consider king e3, getting off of the second rank, just getting a little closer to defending these things. But White is sort of fishing around with the rook the whole time. Oh my gosh, thanks for telling me that, Ash. Jeez, an hour that stupid thing's been sitting there. It was just a little thing I'd prepared, a puzzle to show people while waiting for the tournaments to start that I did not end up using today. Thank you for telling me. And apologies for the poor... What's going on? KFP, usual room janitor, now spending some serious time on this decision here. Alexei has quite a lot of time left in this endgame, playing quite quickly to be 50 moves into the game, deep into a rook endgame. Definitely playing faster than they need to. But I can see they don't really feel like moored in this endgame. They're not really sure what they're trying to do. When you don't really know what you're trying to do or what your opponent's trying to do too precisely, then you don't really know what to spend your time on. So you can definitely understand and explain the time usage a little bit that way. But then there was the whole opening and middle game. I mean, there should have been something along the way that White could really think about. Yeah, I mean, all this looks pretty interesting. Wow, that got really intense for a moment. And then we got into this super cool rook ending. I love it. They fought over the d file. Black won that fight. Right here with f3, Black allowed g4, cutting that pawn off completely. That was a big opportunity for White at the beginning of this rook ending. Black thought 20 seconds on f3, and White spent 3 seconds king here. I mean, g4 or h3, very, very important moves to consider. Black might have had this h5 pawn sack in mind, so that if you take, they can play g4. But even then, this structure you can always break with h3, right? So that could be considered. And also after h5, there's the move h3. takes, takes. Rook here looks scary. But you have to consider this kind of stuff, right? Because this could be your chance to eliminate the f-pawn. And this fancy tactic from black, which usually wins the game, fails because the king's on f7, rook f3 check. So, if rook here, then king here, and white handles it. So this was a very important moment when black played f3 for white to really think hard about their choice, and they just blitzed along. And black got that passed pawn protected in there. Black's won the game while I was recapping it. Went so fast. So let's see what happened. We were in this position. Rook d6 was played. Oh, that's the big move that black thought about, right? Remember I said b5 looked really strong and scary. But black went for rook d6. Assuming they can win the king and pawn ending over on the queen side, or not assuming, they calculated, while the white king is stuck over here. Does that seem true to me? Probably true. So the rook went here, black went after this, white gets the g pawn, and after f2, you can't even play rook f8 because your rook's out of position. And this would have been another place to really think for white. 3 seconds on king e3, but if you come to e1 instead of e3, rook here, your king is stopping the pawn from queening. Could also maybe play king f1. Yeah, that's even better than e1 because there's never rook e2. And now there's no way for black to stop rook g4, so they do something like this, and you take here, and the game goes on. Because you've got this resource, rook g6. Rook g6 check, rook b6 in that final position before chess.com overwhelmed me again. So white had chances even till one move before the end to draw that rook endgame and just never slowed down enough. All right, let's check out Samarth versus Blunderfest. I'm sorry that we can't see the players' names at all. It's really quite annoying. Is there no way to change the window so it shows people's names? There's no size at which chess.com shows the names of the players? I'm making my window absolutely any size it could possibly be, full screen, anything. Nothing. So disappointing and sad to me. Do I like Fianchetto Bishop openings? They're fine. Not like especially more than other openings. All right, Samartha's playing one. I guess that's where the question comes from. So CD knight d4 here takes c4, and now it is a Grunfeld with one extra move for white. So that is actually a little bit scary for Blunderfest to play the right move here, because a lot of the Grunfeld lines are so sharp. There's a danger of basically just losing this pawn and it collapsing, right? Because the rook's on a8. So we can't play d4 or d takes c4 in all positions. And white has these moves knight c3, bishop g5 to put pressure on d5. And as you're playing black, you know, do we have time to play a move like h6? It seems like even less likely that we do. So bishop e6 trying to support the pawn here as much as possible. That certainly makes sense. To me, bishop g5 and queen a4 are big candidate moves. And of course, knight c3 is just playable as well right away. Well, let's work with Samarth on this. Often in these variations here in the real Grunfeld, black plays, and this here it's white playing it, but this is often what's done is you do this to bring the king out here, right? And then we get this kind of position. But this would not be amazing for white, I think, because bishop b4 quickly from black is reasonable. This isn't a line where we need h6 or bishop e7 much. So I don't think that's super amazing. I think it might be nice to just play knight c3. No, okay, he goes for queen a4. So, but then the other thing I'm thinking is after queen d7, maybe hold back on trading. Because for now, the pawn still can't move because if bishop takes c6, right? So here we could go bishop g5 or knight c3 with our queen still on a4, preventing bishop b4 and holding that tension. And this should be perfectly fine. What I don't like is CD, CD, queen d7 here did not feel like the way to take advantage of the extra move of being white. So, Blunderfest hasn't yet played queen d7, but surely they will soon enough, and they do. So now bishop g5 and knight c3. Which one do I prefer? That is interesting, Foos. Yeah, e6 instead of e5. Perhaps better. If black castles queenside, how should black open a pawn storm against white? I mean, in theory, h5, h4, but it's a moot point because black's king will be destroyed on the queen side before black opens up white's king. White's king has a real fortification around it, and you want to castle out into the open wind here. So it's just not going to happen. Yes, there's knight c3, bishop g5, or maybe rook d1 are candidate moves. But I think it should really be the minor pieces first. I don't really have a strong preference between them, but maybe bishop g5, knight e4 for black. Given the position, it threatens to take a piece. And if you take and take rook d1, without that bishop, maybe we can survive as black. And that's why I would play knight c3 first, just because I'm not sure how good this one here is for white. I guess it's pretty good. You go here threatening this, and then if they defend it, you have knight d5. It's probably pretty good, but I think knight c3 first is going to be better. Rook e1? Is that a mouse slip, Samarth? You're supposed to put pressure on d5. I can't even imagine that this was a move that Samarth meant to play. And Blunderfest keeps playing like the most aggressive moves here, despite being black. Now aiming at f2 with knight e4, knight g4 kind of themes. It's perfectly justified too, because white weakened the square while not putting any pressure on black. So yeah, just knock yourself out. Put your pieces on the most aggressive squares if you want to. Yeah. Another reason maybe not to have started with rook d1 here, compared to the minor pieces, knight c3 and bishop g5, is that on rook d1, black might play e4. I guess that's fine for white still. I was going to say sometimes you might want to play f3 there so the rook would be fine. But actually, you still want your rook here. You're here, here, here. They can't... If they defend it, they're sacrificing e4 maybe. Maybe there's bishop b2 though. So maybe they can defend the doubled pawns, but then knight c3 comes, threatening to take on e4 twice. And now the king's got nowhere good to go. Yeah, so rook d1 was probably still playable. Rook e1 makes no sense, though. None at all. Knight c3. So still, the idea for white would be to trade and trade at some point. You know, like if I castled, I just lose my pawn. So it seems black cannot castle here, nor can they play d4, bishop takes c6, or d takes c4, bishop c6. Ah, so here's a very nice move from Blunderfest. Rook c8. Defending the pawn, it says next move I can take or push. So it's saying you need to do this now and resolve that tension. And then we're basically transposing to a main line since white's moved this rook twice. So that means that Blunderfest is now, you know, in black's position. And after this move here, looks like they should be fine. I would guess something like here, here, takes, e3, rook c2, takes, e4. Great pawn down position for black. Yeah, great pawn down position. Black's at least equal. Maybe more likely it's a little bit better for black, who's basically playing white since white's played rook e1, rook d1. We're sort of just back to a normal Grunfeld. So some ideas like that. Why isn't an e4 an option for black? Sometimes it is, Will Blunder something. Sometimes it is. But I did just give a variation, I think, that showed e4 not working. And it was here instead of bishop c5. So here Will Blunder something. I gave this variation. Trades, check. King here, bishop g5. Trying to double the pawns. Bishop e7, knight c3. And this position here is not good for black because white's threatening knight takes c3 using this. And the king doesn't have any good place to go to get out of the way. You know, like if you go to the c file, to get out of the way, there's rook c1. And if you keep going, then at some point white takes, and takes this pawn. And black's going to be down a pawn in these endgames for sure. The e pawn is weak after this. Bishop b2, rook b1. This won't quite work tactically for black. $19.50 OTB in 1 year? You must have played some online before you started up OTB, because that is super high. All right, so white chose e3, giving black the option of taking, as well as the option of pushing and putting the bishop on d4, and blocking this piece. So white is just not in a good position here. Black's got a lot of options here. But Rainbow Teddy's, I mean, yes, I've got a lot of advice. There's only so much there's only so much advice I can give you today for a tournament game tomorrow. Like what I normally do the day before a tournament game is rest, as in not study chess today. And then as far as what I would do tomorrow when you've got your league game, I would do a very light exercise depending on, you know, your body and your energy and stuff. But I would do a very light exercise, like 30 minutes of walking or something like that, before my game, and also no studying, no puzzles, nothing. So I don't know how useful that's going to be to you at this point in where you are. But if you've got a game tomorrow, like, the main advice I can give you is to rest today and tomorrow. And do, use your body, but lightly, because you don't want to be sluggish, and you don't want to be tired either when you play your game. You have to walk to the chess club, so that works out nicely, right? It's perfect. Getting up at 7 and driving 3 hours is not a great start to a game. Yeah, that's definitely not good. I try to avoid doing that if I can, but it sounds like you don't have a choice with the setup tomorrow. So best advice I could give you would be maybe drive there at least an hour before the game so that you can, stretch your legs and walk around there before you play, and get out of the car mode a little bit. I could give you more advice for your sure. I can give you more advice, for the future than for the game tomorrow, I'm sure you've got another league game in a few weeks. You have to just be driven. That's good. At least you can relax in the car. So that's a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, I can give you more help for a league game that's a little bit further down the road, right? Which would include the game you play tomorrow, analyze it, show it to some other people, see what they think about the game after you play it, so you can compare their ideas with yours. Oh, folks, super aggressive move from Blunderfest, opening up with the H-pawn headed towards H4 to try and soften up White's king. H4 to prevent it from White. Sure, I mean, White could also have played Rook D1 here, just see how Black defends this pawn. Seems worth playing. Exactly. If you're not going to stop after tomorrow's game, I can give you some advice that reaches a little bit further into the future from tomorrow's game. So, maybe if White plays Rook D1, Black's planning to try and tempo White with Bishop G4, huh? So yeah, I mean, I told you we've got this training program which has like all the advice, which you could always sign up for and follow. But just some offhand advice here on stream, each time you play a game, analyze it afterwards. If you have no experience analyzing games, just do it even though you don't know what you're doing. The important thing is to get started and to try, and to spend some time with the game. There's a lot of people think like, oh, I might do it wrong, but there isn't really a right or wrong way to annotate a game. Any work you do analyzing a game of yours is good work, and you just start somewhere. Okay, great. You always do it. Okay. So strong advice that you delay the engine. Make sure you look at it yourself first, then with your friend who has a similar rating to you, which is great. And only in the third round you can look at it with the engine if you want to. I would recommend never using the engine, but you might not trust me enough to listen, so I'm not going to waste my breath on that. But it's best not to use the engine at all at your level. For what it's worth, I'll just mention it and then we'll move on. I'm a little bit tired of always arguing about it, so I'm not going to argue about it today. I'll just tell you. But definitely look at it with your friend first. Look at it on your own first, then with your friend. That's great. It is a big part of the fun as well as a big part of the learning process. And then another important concept, Rainbow Teddies, I would say is, I think that the most basic training program you could have is to be playing games and analyzing them, which we've already talked about. Second piece is doing some calculation work. And the third piece is studying something. Now, you've got a million options for what you study for the third piece. But the important piece of advice there is, focus. Pick one thing that you want to study for a couple weeks. It could be a chess book, like you have Reassess Your Chess, it sounds like. It could be Reassess Your Chess. It could be just practicing rook endgames for a couple weeks. A very important piece of how we train in the chess dojo is something called sparring. So basically, if you were trying to get better at rook endings, you would take several different rook endgame positions and you would practice them with your 1900 rated friend, So for now, you can just focus on Reassess Your Chess, but at some point, you'll want to study the next thing, right? And so we think that openings, middle games, and end games can all be practiced with this method of sparring. So basically, you and your buddy set up a certain kind of rook ending. You play it a couple times with white and with black at kind of a rapid to blitzy time control. Maybe 1 minute plus 30-second increment, or 5 minutes plus 5-second increment, something like that, right? Play it. And every time you play a couple games, you talk together. You say, I think this plan was good, or this plan was bad, or, I thought white had the advantage here. And, just sort of check in. You share your ideas freely, then you play more games against each other, and you keep going. Life and Games of Tal. Yes, fire on board. Woo! The good news is you've got classics there, not some random throwaway junk. And one important thing to understand about what we think about reading these books, Rainbow Teddies, is that it's better to really get into one book for a couple weeks than to read 5 pages, 5 pages, 5 pages, and keep switching what you're doing. So commit to something and work on it for a bit, for a few weeks. And then for your calculation piece, you are good enough that you shouldn't be doing just like Puzzle Rush or Tactics Trainer on chess.com anymore. Those puzzles are not deep enough and hard enough. And you always know that they're forced wins. You always know that there's one solution. It's too simple and too clear for the level you are at now. You can go through one of those books in 1 week. Wow, that's fantastic, Rainbow Teddies. That's really great. It means you've got good focus and you're getting good work done and you're getting deep into something, and then you move on to the next thing. That's kind of how I worked on chess when I was, let's say, 12, 13, 14, 15, and doing like the bulk of my early learning, going from like 1200 to 2200. I would basically read one book every week. You would think so, Rainbow Teddies, but actually it's a really terrible book. I would just not read that book. Maybe you can resell it to somebody else or use it to start a fire. And read one of those other books you mentioned that were really good books. All the other ones were great. That book is one of the worst I've seen in my life, which is really weird because I think he's one of the best chess coaches in the world right now, if not like the best, right? But certainly one of the best chess coaches in the world. And I have that book back here. It's just bad. Hard to. I mean, I'm supposed to also look at these games that we're watching here, Rainbow Teddies. But like basically, it just gives you a bunch of positions. It doesn't give you any kind of guidance about how far you're supposed to be looking, how much time are you supposed to be using, like what, and then it just gives you a bunch of computer variations in those positions. And it doesn't even tell you, like, if you saw this variation, it's good. If you missed this variation, that's bad. Like, there's no useful feedback about it. Like, all it does is it gives you, like, nigh impossible positions. And then it shows you, like, a computer printout of, like, what the possible variations were. And you have no idea how good or how bad you did. Okay, d4 from Blunderfest, bringing the bishop to d4. The pawn is still supported for now. It's not super solid with the rook here and the king here. Samarth goes after trading this piece to weaken the file a little bit more, which is logical. King gets off the file. And now Blunderfest can get the classic passed pawn of the Grunfeld. This is like the big asset of the Grunfeld is this pawn But also very importantly, a2 is dangling here. So white is going to be scrambling to stay in this game after the a2 pawn gets traded. Ash, a very good early selection of game collection would be something like Most Instructive Games of Chess by Irving Chernev or Logical Chess Move by Move. Those are some sort of beginner-oriented collection of games books, yeah? Yeah, Rainbow Teddies. Jeremy Silman sadly passed away a little while ago. We did a dojo podcast honoring him at the time, where we talked about his influence on chess. And every time we talk about the best chess books in some context, best chess books of all time, most instructive chess books, something like that, his name and his books always come up again. And they're also in our training program. We use his endgame manual in the training program as like our main endgame textbook. And there's a lot of good options out there, So, okay. 94 from Samarth. I was thinking the knight might also go to b5 to try to hassle these pawns, but he goes to e4. So Blunderfest is going to trade on e4 and then probably trade one rook on c1 and then grab here is my guess. All right, white preempts it by trading there, which was a good choice by white. Very, very alert by Samarth, not just to recapture, but to throw in rook c8. Very alert. Because the rook is slightly better on d8. The critical line is something like, takes here, here, here. And if your rook's on d8, black can play d3, and it looks like the pawn goes all the way, right? But here, white's threatening rook d7, and white has bishop d3, so the pawn is not immediately winning the game. So this might have been, the moment where Samarth actually saved the game, as it was not going great for white up to this point. And now Blunderfest with 5.5 minutes is thinking here. The Amateur's Mind by Silman. Yeah, that's a good book, Blurp. Definitely. Yeah, wow, you've read a lot, Rainbow Teddies. That's awesome. That makes sense with you getting to 1900 in 1 year of OTB play. I used to hate endgames as well. I'm also a former endgame hater who now loves them. So, yay. And good job, Silman, to be the guy who helped you transition from hating endgames to not hating them. Hi to the Reckless Motorcycle. And the Yusupov series, I think, is good. Will Blunder Something. I haven't read all of it, but I think it's a good series. A5, keeping pawns on the board by Blunderfest. Yeah, that makes sense, because bishop a2, rook a1, rook a7. This was going nowhere, this move here now. This would have been a winning line for black with the rook on d8, I think. d3, d2. I just didn't see any way for white not to lose. But here it's worthless for black, so a5 makes sense, leaving an extra target on the board on a2 and still the passed pawn, but white has every chance to draw this endgame still. They start with a3, maybe freezing those pawns. I was thinking the first move would be rook here, threatening this pawn, make black react and defend it. But okay, a3, king here. Now, white needs to do something about the rook activity. If you let black's king get up and defend this pawn, then your rook won't matter on d1, and black's rook is going to be just better than ours. So white has a choice between rook d1 or maybe b4, trying to trade a pawn and make an outside passer. That's the only other option I see here. b4 or rook d1, trying to make the black rook defend its pawn. Noch ein David, that's cool. Hey Miles, the command for today is play. And you are welcome to join our tournaments here. Rook d1 gets played now, and the rook has to come defend it. And now white could consider, taking the file away from black, or throwing in the move b4, which I also highly recommend. Although it's not necessary. It's not necessary to play b4 here because black is not yet able to play rook b8 without this trade. But I think b4 looks pretty good. I think, the bishop could come in here and play a4 if we don't play b4 now, and it'll be fixed as a slight weakness on b2. Better to have a passed pawn, Samarth. Yeah! Nice move. a4. Ay. Evil. Evil. Okay, so now, I think maybe bishop c2 is the move. I didn't consider this move enough. Blunderfest always makes things hard. If you come here, then the bishop locks in here defending it, and we're struggling a little bit with this pawn. But if we go bishop c2, it seems more passive, but we keep our rook. We keep control over this pawn, and it's hard for them to defend this, right? If they go bishop d7, we can play rook d4. And if they go bishop b3, let me make sure I can deal with this. I would need to take and then play here. I was about to fall in for, I get rid of the pawn, but boom, 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 boom. Oh, that's okay too. Yeah, the king's close enough. Okay, so it would be okay. So bishop c2 seems like the move. White plays rook d2, a waiting move. So black should lock in bishop on b3, and then they've got a little edge. Why is a5, a4 evil? Good question, Kenyu. Basically, it's because it keeps pressure on white. If you trade like this, the game is simplifying. You each have one passed pawn. At some point, they're likely to get traded. When you attack one, you'll leave the other undefended. The game's going to be very, very close to equal, right? When he plays a4, he keeps this pawn alive close to queening on the opponent's side of the board. So he's got the idea to eventually attack this pawn and try and queen this. So now, like a typical maneuver from black could be the following. Rook c8, rook d4, rook c3. Now, this is refuted in this exact position by rook d3. I'm just trying to show you an idea. You get into a situation like this, and you create a weird race with this pawn. Here I've played no bad moves for white, so I'm not going to succeed in, tricking white because I'm playing good moves for white. You see? But there is this possibility to at some point switch over to attacking the A pawn, and then this pawn can win the game. So it just keeps an extra asset on the board. It makes the game just one level more complicated, and thus more difficult for the opponent. Bishop c4 played. Keeping the king away, keeping some more tension like this. Sure. So, for example, against bishop d3, this could immediately become a theme. Rook here takes, rook here. It's based on this king being slightly better than this king, and this pawn starting a little more advanced, and then this comes here, and check, here, here, and white should be fine with this kind of a sequence, right? So black's play is very energetic and confident for sure, Pisani. That can be said of Blunderfest in general. Basically always plays very confidently and energetically. So white tries to bring the king towards the center. The black king, however, is finding a nicer square than the white king because of the space from this pawn. You can do that with the arenas as well, Filet Gefilte Fish. Yes, I will do some Swiss-style tournaments occasionally. I've been really liking the fact that the arenas let people show up late and still play. Because when I run the Swiss tournaments, 5 people show up on time, and they get to play a 3-round tournament, and the other 10 people who show up late don't get to play at all. So, and I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but I feel like more people show up late than on time. So I feel like to make that Swiss experience, we're sacrificing the majority of the people not getting to play. I could maybe make a 1-section arena and call it the latecomers arena, and then run 3 Swiss tournaments on a given day, so people get more of a feeling of winning a tournament. But, you know. Yeah, Blibup has a vote for the arena because it's easier to come in and out, get busy in the kitchen, and still get a couple games in. Bishop or knight? I think the bishop is better than the knight in general, as do pretty much all strong chess players at this point. You know, even the computer engines have revealed this sort of a truth to us. Now, Blunderfest with the king on e5 could have, you know, rook c8, rook c3 for free even for white to worry about. But waited so long that white got the pawn to f4. I'm not sure why Blunder never put the king on e5. You do love the poor knights. Fair enough. Underdog story and all. And Blunderfest is down under a minute as well, so they've used a lot of time here without yet being able to make any huge progress. If you push this pawn, white's king is in good enough position that white can encircle the pawn and handle it. So it's not easy to make progress here for black. Of course, you can play rook d7, rook d8, but that's not Blunderfest. Blunderfest is going to try something to try to win. So f5, forcing the bishop to choose a direction. Blunderfest would love to bring the king through, if given the chance. So big question for Samarth with just seconds ticking down. Which way do we go with the bishop? It's a tough question to decide low on time. Bishop tucks itself in, keeping d3 under control for the moment, but black is now prepared to advance the king into here. If bishop check, the king can come in here. Tries to get in rook c5, gets cut off by the powerful king in the middle of the board, and suddenly white's position is absolutely critical. Don't know what to do for white anymore. Threatens the a-pawn. Nice try. And you see Blunderfest sacking it to go rook e2, rook e3, etc. White tries to hold it off. Is the move d3 possible? Yes. d3 is possible, but there is bishop a4 as well. So d3, bishop a4, you'd have to go rook a8. That's pretty good for black. Blunderfest using the last bits of time here to decide which way to go. You can also trade, but then your pawn is, hanging. So just goes to defend, gets pushed back. And this king needs to cross over to d2 at some point. Rook a5, obsessed with clarifying the situation around the a-pawn, but that is not it, my friend. Blunderfest switches back to the open file. No! There goes that pawn. Bishop a4, f4, because Blunderfest is evil. If you go d3, white plays king e3. So Blunderfest tries to keep the white king back. Bishop needs to drop back and these pawns need to get going. Or should b5, b6 be played right away? Probably. And Samarth with great instincts goes for that. He's going to have to keep pushing it. Great instinct. Bishop here. Now bishop c6 is playable, right? No. Then d2. Oh my god. It's intense. The bishop drops back just to make way for this pawn. And it stops king g4 to h4. Wow, Samarth is great under pressure. So low on time. Great defensive instincts. Holy moly. Absolute shocking, impressive defense from Samarth here. Normally everybody crumbles against Blunderfest in this phase, if they even make it to this phase. Electrifying. The pawn advances. If this pawn ever advances, white can probably just pick it up with king e2. The king can't come across. Black is basically looking at g5 to make it past h-pawn, but it will not be enough to break white's defenses here. Because g5, hg, king g5, king e3, h4, uh-oh, Maybe it'll have to be the king coming over this way. Blunderfest waits, a5. Samarth catches up on time. Just waiting moves. Is this supposed to be a Zugzwang? Holy moly. White finds some kind of move to play. There's a chance for the king to come over to g4, and then bishop b5 should be good enough. Bishop a6 gets played, and white could drop back here or do other things. That's a repetition. Just go back, Samarth. You don't need to kill yourself trying to win. Samarth does not repeat. As long as the bishop's here, you can't go to d5 to win because of this, and your king's cut off, right? So he waits with bishop a4. Oh my gosh, Samarth is trying to find a Zugzwang to get the advantage here. He wants the bishop to drop back, and then he's going to go there. So Blunderfest pushes the pawn, giving up control over this square, at least for the moment. So now bishop d1 is logical. 4 seconds for white. White finds it. Now the idea is to go bishop e2 at some point, or bishop f3, and try and push these pawns. Plus king e2 to come over. King e4 played. b7, bishop takes, check, loses because black queen's at the end. Bishop b3. Black's king is loose. Black's king is loose, and it's headed for b4. Samarth is rushing here to try and clean these up. I guess king e3 should be good enough. And white, Samarth, what instincts? The king is going to be able to draw the game by coming here. Amazing. The bishop's got just long enough diagonal here that it can't get fully chased off by the king. Takes, and it is going to be a draw. I think, as long as this bishop can get back in time to not get pantsed. King h5, king b4, king g6, king a5, h5, king b6, h6, bishop d3. Yeah, should be a draw. Okay, king could go to a square that doesn't get checked, but black's still in time, I believe. King g5, king a5, h5, king b6, h6, bishop d3. Whew! Incredible from both players. Bravo. Now that is some high-class endgame play, my friends. Finally ends in a draw. Wow. The pressure that Samarth withstood there. That endgame was definitely unpleasant for white when black had the pawn on d4, rook and bishop, everything centralized. Yeah, that was heavy. Heavy. Yep. I suggest that you start using the engine to check your work around 21 to 2200 FIDE, Rainbow Teddies. Yeah. And even at that level, I suggest doing almost all your work yourself first and using the engine to check it. You know, versus having the engine versus just running the engine on something and then reading what the engine said without having thought about it along the way yourself, you know? Yeah, Lawrence, that's the dojo's recommendation too, so we're on the same page. Thank you, Kenya. That was quite a great game. All right, let's pick another game, shall we? Let's go to the under 1300 section next. Let's see, current events. Friday, Saturday, under 1300 arena. Let's pick a game here. We've got a new game just kicking off between Entire Pigeon, who I think is in the lead in the tournament standings. Entire Pigeon, first place. And NXD1 Plus is in third place. All right. Starting off with the Caro Khan. Is the screen capture intact still? Yep. Barinos. No, I don't mean to checkmate Rainbow Teddies. I mean, like, you know, what would you use a computer to study for? You might use it to analyze your games, or you might use it to analyze your openings, right? And so what I would say is, in all those cases, you want to first try to analyze something yourself, then run the computer on it to get new ideas. Instead of just giving the computer a game of yours to analyze or an opening line to analyze and then just trying to look over and memorize what the computer's done. The learning will always be more active if you thought about it first, right? So that you've engaged with the thing, and then when you see what the computer thinks about it, it's in the context of what you already thought about it, and you're like, oh, that's what I missed when I looked at this position. It's much more instructive for you that way. That is correct, Cross Online. Gukesh is the most famous modern example of somebody who went the furthest without using a computer engine. Well, obviously he went the furthest. He's the world chess champion, rated like 2790 or something. But but yeah, he made it to 2500 GM before he ever used the computer engine. So he has incredible calculation skills for himself. I guess so, definitely. I guess so. I hadn't properly understood what that term, how that term is currently used until Jesse used it on me one day recently, and then I looked it up online. F3! Entire pigeon goes for a gambit. Ash is like, oh, no. This is going to hold back your development, entire pigeon. Right, Ash? This is the kind of stuff that David used to play all the time. Trying to get Black Redeemer gambits and stuff. Oh, I used to play that stuff too. Oh, yeah. But Ash is going to say this is going to hold back your development. You spend all your time playing these lines. Then at some point you get up to like 16, 1700 level and your opponents start playing E5 instead of taking your pawn. They just play a principled move, opening up their bishop, countering the center, leaving your pawn on F3. Your knight on G1 super happy about that pawn on F3, right? And then, sorry, that's a mistake, right? Obviously, just a mouse click error. But, then people start playing this, and you're like, oh, why did I spend so much of my life, playing F3 and trying to make it work? Then the worst case scenario is you do what I did, which is you're like, okay, F3, E5 doesn't work. Let me play bishop C4 first. Then after knight F6, play F3, because now on E5 you can take, and you've got this tempo on the knight, so it's not so bad. So you try and find like slightly more refined ways to still keep playing the Black Redeemer, when you should be learning just positional, positional chess. Here. You just have to be comfortable just playing chess. Right, Ash? So we get F3, and Black has not moved yet. Oh, it's a new move to them, and they're taking their time. Great reaction by NX D1 plus, or knight takes D1. Thinking, do we want to take? Do we want to push? What are all our options? Good call. Milner Berry Gambit, you can play General Blorp. That one's actually playable. I did play it as a kid. I didn't do great with it. But, now, that's an example of something where the supercomputers have actually reinforced White's play in that particular gambit. They value overprotecting the pawn on E5, instead of playing the old lines where you would sack the pawn on E5 as well as the pawn on D4. Anyway, Smith-Mora is also sort of borderline playable, but I would recommend not only learning the Smith-Mora. You can play anything you like to. Just make sure to learn other things too, so you don't become one-dimensional. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with playing the gambits as long as you play other things. Let me refine the conversation that Ash and I have been having about gambits. It's totally fine to play second-rate, third-rate, fourth-rate openings. It's the only way you know whether or not they're second or third-rate and by how much, you know? Like, look at this. Albin counter gambit. You know, takes, and then, you know, humans always thought that A3 nearly refuted the Albin counter gambit. Then they fed it to supercomputers, and the supercomputers agreed. A3 is this brilliant move that stops bishop b4, and it allows you to play knight f3, knight c6. Sorry, maybe I should throw in knight f3, knight c6. I don't even know. But anyway, you know, we're going to get this position here. And it gives you this idea of b4, b5, kicking the knight, because these are the squares we're fighting about, right? And bishop b2. And the supercomputers confirmed. This is a great line for white. Genius, right? But I played like a blitz game on the white side of this line recently, and I didn't understand the position well enough. I made a couple errors that would have allowed my opponent to equalize. They kept blundering back into the position that's an advantage for white. Finally, I got the standard opening advantage you're supposed to be able to get for white, and I just barely managed to convert it, but I think most players under 2,000 would not know how to convert the standard advantage white gets here in a classical game. So practicing this opening is not like a bad thing for someone's development. You can play this with white or with black, whatever, and you learn something about chess, right? Because actually the way the lines go is often something like this, going after this pawn. What's the kind of advantage we normally get? Okay, let me go like knight e7, maybe b4, knight here. Maybe this is kind of like the main kind of thing you get. And the advantage we're getting for white is not winning a pawn. You know, it's more like something like this kind of a position. And black gets the pawn back on c4, see? So you get this kind of a position, and they drop back like this. And yeah, bishop e6, f6 coming. Like, does anybody here feel like, oh yeah, I know how to just win this kind of endgame 100%, you know, against strong opponents in classical? This is just like the kind of position to learn. But the trap is, if you insist on only playing this kind of opening, and you try and, you know, for years just try to keep making this opening that's not objectively good, you just try and keep making it like okay and limping along with it, right? So like I had too long a period where I kept trying to make the Benoni work instead of learning some more other openings. I had too long a period where I kept trying to make the King's Gambit work instead of also saying like, hey, for 1 year I'm going to play the Italian game, and for 1 year I'm going to play the Ruy Lopez, and then I can always come back to the King's Gambit. The fact that I've played the King's Gambit and some people haven't, that's an advantage for me. The fact that they've played the Ruy and I haven't, that's an advantage for them. So, you know, if we're trying to eventually become like an 1800 to 2000 level player, we have to be able to play more than just one narrow, dubious gambit repertoire. Okay, so it's fine to play the gambits as long as you play other stuff too. My overall take. All right. Yeah, that position is pleasant for white, Rainbow Teddies. I just think it's not like black has to resign. And, you know, when we say that this opening here is sort of refuted for black, it's a useful lesson to see to what extent is it actually refuted. You know, it's not like anyone's actually resigning that position, right? It's just a bit pleasant for white. All right, let's see how their game goes. Black plays knight f6. White takes on e4, then black counters with e5. Idea, pawn takes, queen takes, king takes, knight g4, tempo on f2. Something horrible like king e1, and after knight e5, black is comfortable. Or after bishop b4 or bishop c5 or any number of other moves. So after e5, countering the center, white now plays knight f3. Very interesting that this 1200 rated player's instinct was like, let me stop and think. I don't necessarily want the extra pawn. They thought 3 minutes and came up with an idea that involves developing and this counter with e5. They were very, very close to finding e5 immediately refuting white's game, right? Because when they played knight f6, they actually planned this e5 move. So they were very close to finding this idea. Now trade on d4, get the queen trade, bishop c5 with tempo, and black's getting a very clean position. All the pieces coming out, right? Bravo. very clean position. They've dealt with white center becoming too big, right? There's only one pawn. It's isolated. They can have rook e8. They can have knight g4. Development is fine. So it's a great play by black here in this opening. Very, very good use of their time. Bishop d3. White's developing all the pieces. And thank you for the raid. Miles plays chess. Welcome, raiders. We are watching viewers playing each other in an arena. So these are people just like you and you and you and you. Just battling here in this arena. Let me rearrange my screen just a tiny bit. Okay. So this move is good against rook e8. So black's going to want to strongly consider moves like rook d8 and knight g4 here, going after these two pieces in their position. How you doing, Miles? Hope you had a good stream. Man, time has really flown today. I was away for like 4 or 5 days up in the mountains, catching some snow with the kids. Long castle is possible here, for sure. Happiest clown, yeah. Depends whether black plays a move like rook d8 or knight g4, though, putting immediate threats on white. In the game, black has played knight bd7, and white has castled queenside, just like you were thinking. So they're as happy as you. Yeah. Hey, yeah, chess. Merles, are you talking about the endgame with Samarth, which we watched live on stream? That was pretty intense. Samarth played great under pressure. Knight e5, good square for the knight. Yeah, black's pretty solid here. Pretty solid. It's hard to evolve like a great plan for white with the isolated pawn. But, I mean, there's always something to do in any chess position. Yeah, we saw you trying so hard. It was so close. It was a great one. We watched the whole thing. You can watch the replay if you want. It was fun times. If rook takes d8, would knight c6 work? You mean before castle's queenside, right? Because by now, rook d8, knight c6, there'll always be bishop e3 with check. So you must be thinking bishop d3, rook d8 at this point. Would knight c6 have worked? My instinct is no, Foos. I mean, it's very interesting tactically, but it feels like something that shouldn't work. How about bishop takes, knight takes, bishop b6? Tricky. White does have some shots here. They've got e5. Trying to get something out of the 8th rank. Looks like black will hold together and be able to dig the pieces out in this line, probably. Hey, Landon. Welcome to our stream. And Merles, yeah, I want to echo what P. Saney is saying. That was one of the most fun games to watch that we've had. I mean, we've had a lot of fun games to watch. The time's just been flying today. I'm just realizing, in 15 minutes it's time for the ballet class for my daughter. So I only have like 15 minutes left of commentary, but the time has just flown by. Yeah, chess. His idea, Foos' idea, is that if you take back here, then after bishop takes, white won a pawn. And got the bishop pair in the meantime. So this would not be good for black to simply recapture on c6. You need to do something fancy as black here. Here's another fancy move you could try as black. Rook takes d3. Hitting all these kinds of things. Oh, loved it, Apache. Man, you played with some great energy in that middle game. So the idea is takes, but I think here, White actually might sneak away at the end with this sting at the tail end, with the knight heading into c8. And the only chance for Black is something like bishop c5, try and keep the knight in, and I feel like it shouldn't work. You know, I feel like there should be some pretty basic option for White to go rook d1 or castles, and then when you attack this knight, play d4. Oh, wait. No, I made it harder for myself than it needed to be. Maybe e5 coming out at d6. Or just knight a4 harassing the bishop. What should I do? Okay, it's not easy. It's not easy, but there's something. It ain't easy being greedy. I guess I just got to go e5 to make sure I save my knight. It's going to ruin my pawns. Right? To do something like this. Blech. But, okay, I still have the extra exchange and, you know, good chances to win this endgame as White. So, yeah, it's a complicated question, Foo. Sorry, we're not going to get a perfect answer before we move on, actually. H3 was played. Great move, taking away this square from the bishop and the knights. Rook e8, rook e1. Good play by both sides. Black's getting a bit low on time, though. I mean, 5 minutes, and we're at move 13. They're going to have to speed up or suffer at some point here. Yeah, I saw you said pawn takes knight, but that would only be a little bit worse, yeah, chess, because it doesn't develop your pieces, right? Black still will be down a pawn without a great position. Salut, chérie. Qu'est-ce qui t'appelle? C'est Moana? Tu veux monter? Tu peux. J'ai juste encore 5 minutes ici, et puis ce sera le temps de balai. Okay. Folks, in a moment, you're not really going to be able to hear what I say because we've got some loud Disney music coming in. Hey, salut! Oh, Petit Miaou! Oh non, ça c'est pas Petit Miaou. Petit Miaou est rose, n'est-ce pas? Comment tu appelles celle-là? Miaou. Ok. C'est Miaou. Tu veux le chien? Tu veux celui-là? Black one? Okay. Woo! All right, folks. I don't know if you can hear anything I would say anymore at this point. But the players are continuing to play an interesting game. Black's going to have to get this bishop out of the way so this rook can come here. Even if it's just a plan like bishop d7, rook d8, bishop back to c8. Something like that has to happen at some point. Okay.
Look at Dad. Look at Dad.
Tu veux voir?
Yeah, Dad.
Qu'est-ce que tu vois?
Look at Dad.
Oh, tu vois ton papa? Ouais. Toi, t'es là aussi maintenant, regarde. Si je fais comme ça,
Yeah.
tu vas être là dans un moment, tu vas voir. Regarde, tu vas apparaître dans le programme. Ah! Voilà! Tu vois?
Yeah.
T'es là. Hein? C'est bien, hein? Oh, Black brings the other rook to d8, so they're just not seeing how to get those things arranged into the game. If the knight moves, maybe they're going to win a pawn, but you got to get these out. Away, away. We know the way. e5. Complicated choice from white. Bishop e3 makes more sense, I think, just to defend everything and not press the issue. The thing about e5 is it improves this bishop a little bit by taking the pawn off of e4. Babu. This knight doesn't have anywhere good to go, though, so there is that. Plus de Moana.
Oh, good crap.
Tu penses qu'il y aura le crabe maintenant? Ok. Une autre chanson de Moana?
Okay. I see what's happening here.
98 or 97. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, chess. Those make sense. Let's see what happened. It's adorable. Knight g4. Ooh! Electrifying. Love it. Knight takes d1 plays great. They just need a little more time. They must be used to playing classical more than rapid. Les pouces, n'est-ce pas? This guy. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Tu veux là? Qu'est-ce que tu veux? Tu es là? Ouais, regarde. Si je fais ça, tu vas voir que tu es là. T'as raison. T'es partout maintenant. Ouais. Alright, an entire pigeon's having a good think here how to deal with this situation. White could take, or even just move the knight away. This knight might slip into f2 then. Oui? Il est là? Ok. On y va? On y va? Alrighty, folks. So, yeah, knight c6 again looks very interesting. Knight f3, black has this knight f2 sneaking in, trapping the rook. Knight c6 is interesting, but after takes, bishop g4 is perfectly sound for black still. So this knight g4 move actually looks like straight up, we've just witnessed a brilliancy as the last, well, a brilliancy plus you're welcome from Maui as the conclusion for today's show. The tournaments are going to continue for another hour. So anybody who wants to play, feel free to keep playing. Here's exclam play for you. The command's over here. And for anyone over in YouTube, here's a link where you can find games or these tournaments to play. Yes, I'm trying to raise my kids to speak other languages. My big kids, just in the last week, amazing thing, they finally said, like, hey, maybe we should learn other languages. And so they've just started trying to learn some Spanish, but they're trying to do it via Duolingo, which is silly, instead of letting me teach it to them. David. All right, so do you know where the hairbrushes? In either her backpack or Lupin's. I've unpacked Lupin's. Because I stuck it into the outer pouch of one of the two purple backpacks yesterday. Okay, we got to go to ballet, so enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and